The bobcat had been in the yard for nearly 20 minutes before anyone realized it was not there by accident. At first, Evelyn Harper thought it was just another strange early evening sighting from the kitchen window, the kind of brief, wild moment that happened from time to time in the wooded stretch behind their subdivision. Deer sometimes moved along the creek line at dusk. Foxes crossed the back lots in winter. Once, a coyote had trotted straight down the fence row with such calm confidence that the neighborhood group chat had talked about it for 3 days. So when Evelyn looked up from rinsing salad greens and saw a tawny cat-shaped animal standing motionless near the back fence, she did not panic. She only narrowed her eyes, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and stepped closer to the glass. Then the animal moved into the open. It wasn't a stray cat. It wasn't a dog. It was a bobcat, lean and compact, with dark ear tufts, a short tail, and a coat patterned in dusty spots that caught the last gold light of evening. But what struck Evelyn most wasn't the fact that a wild bobcat had come into a suburban backyard in broad daylight. It was what the animal was looking at, the trampoline. It stood in the middle of the Harper family's backyard, a full-sized round one with a black safety net and blue pad around the springs. Bought 2 summers earlier after months of pleading from her 10-year-old son Owen and his younger sister Lily. It sat on a patch of worn grass between the oak tree and the garden beds, usually harmless and cheerful, the sort of thing children treated like the center of the universe, and adults tried not to think about too hard from an injury perspective. But now in the fading light, the trampoline seemed to hold the entire focus of the bobcat's body. The animal would stare at the frame, then circle halfway around it, then stop again and watch the underside as if something beneath it mattered desperately. "Ben," Evelyn called toward the den. "Come here a second." Her husband came in half distracted, still holding his reading glasses in one hand and a cordless drill in the other from some unfinished shelf project in the garage. Ben Harper was 44, broad-shouldered, practical, and generally inclined to look for mechanical explanations before emotional ones. He stepped up beside her, followed her gaze, and went still at once. "That's a bobcat," he said. "I noticed." It was their daughter Lily who said what both of them were thinking. "Why is it staring at the trampoline?" No one answered her, because none of them knew. Outside, the bobcat paced again. It moved to the left side of the trampoline, lowered its head, and peered beneath the black jumping mat into the shadowed space under the frame. Then it stepped back and looked toward the house. Not at the tree line, not at the open gate to the side yard, at the house, at the people in the kitchen window. Then it turned back toward the trampoline and made a low, rough sound that carried faintly even through the glass. Evelyn felt a chill run through her arms. "That is not normal," Ben said quietly. Their house sat at the edge of a newer development in northern Arkansas, where the last few streets gave way to a patch of second-growth woods and a shallow creek beyond. The backyards were broad but not huge, separated by wooden fences and chain-link runs, with enough shared tree cover that wildlife sometimes passed through unnoticed if no dogs barked. On warm evenings, neighbors often chatted over fence lines, while children bounced on trampolines, chased soccer balls, or rode scooters along the cul-de-sac. It was an ordinary place for ordinary family life, which was exactly why the bobcat's stubborn presence felt so wrong. "Get the kids away from the door," Evelyn said at once. But even after Lily and Owen were moved back from the glass, the family stayed watching. The bobcat still would not leave. It circled the trampoline once more, stopped at the same point near the back leg, and scratched sharply at the grass beneath it. Then it looked up again toward the house. Ben frowned. "Maybe there's a rabbit under there." "Then why doesn't it just go after it?" Evelyn asked. That question hung in the kitchen for several long seconds. Across the fence, their neighbor Russell Dean was in his own yard, putting a cover over the grill, when Owen, unable to contain himself any longer, shouted through the cracked mudroom door, "Mr. Russell, there's a bobcat in our yard." Russell, a retired contractor with a hearing aid in one ear and the unhurried habits of someone who had seen enough strange things not to rush toward any of them, straightened and looked over. "A what?" Ben stepped onto the back patio, keeping the storm door between himself and the yard, and pointed. Russell walked closer to his fence and saw the animal instantly. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. The bobcat had shifted now to the far side of the trampoline, closest to Russell's fence. It crouched low, ears forward, staring at the dark space beneath the jumping mat. Then just as Russell stepped within better hearing range, everyone heard it. A thud, soft, muffled, coming from beneath the trampoline. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Ben went still. Russell's expression changed so fast it seemed to rearrange his whole face. The sound came again, a small, uneven thump, then a scratch. "There's something under there," Russell said. The bobcat answered with that same rough, clipped cry and darted to the exact spot where the sound had come from, then backpedaled as if making room. Now everything made sense and didn't make sense at the same time. Something was under the trampoline. Something large enough to make a thud, small enough to be trapped, and somehow important enough for a wild bobcat to ignore every instinct telling it to stay away from a lit house full of humans. Ben grabbed his phone and called animal control, but the answer was the same answer families always got after business hours in a semi-rural county. Someone would come as soon as possible, which might mean 20 minutes, might mean an hour, might mean not soon enough. The thud came again, weaker this time. "No," Evelyn said. "We're not waiting." Ben turned to her. "If that bobcat has kittens under there, then all the more reason not to stand here." Her voice was tight now, driven by the same kind of certainty that took over when one of the kids was hurt. "Something is trapped." Russell had already unlatched his side gate. "I've got a flashlight." What followed happened in the quick, brittle rhythm of people acting before they had time to fully process how strange the situation had become. Ben pulled on work gloves from the mudroom bench. Russell came over with a flashlight and a short pry bar he had been using on fence boards earlier. Evelyn grabbed 2 outdoor chair cushions and an old blanket from the patio storage box for reasons she couldn't have explained, except that she knew something might need a soft place to be set down. Owen and Lily were sent firmly upstairs to the front bedroom with instructions not to come back down, though both immediately crouched at the front window where they could see nothing and hear everything. Outside, the evening air smelled of cut grass, warm wood, and the distant metallic scent of coming rain. The bobcat remained in the yard, pacing in a widening circle around the trampoline frame, then coming back to the same point beneath the rear half of the mat. It never once tried to attack or flee. It only watched the humans gather and then look back under the trampoline. Ben approached first, moving slowly, one hand raised slightly in front of him. The bobcat retreated just enough to keep distance, then stopped and stood rigid near the garden border. Russell crouched and angled the flashlight under the trampoline. At first, the beam showed only the usual lost things children gathered beneath play equipment: a red rubber ball, a forgotten flip-flop, 2 chalk sticks, a scattering of dry leaves. Then the beam reached the center support legs and the whole mood of the yard changed. "There," Russell said sharply. Something small moved under the dark center of the trampoline. Ben dropped to one knee and peered under beside him. A tiny spotted body was wedged awkwardly between the central frame ring and one of the lower support braces. A bobcat kitten, no older than maybe 7 or 8 weeks, had somehow climbed under from the wood side of the fence, perhaps chasing movement, perhaps following its mother, and then leapt upward at the hanging underside of the jumping mat. One foreleg had slipped through the narrow V-shaped gap where the support brace met the central ring, and in struggling to pull free, the kitten had twisted itself partly sideways. Every movement now jammed the leg and shoulder tighter against the steel frame. That was the thud they had heard, the little body banging weakly against the metal whenever it tried and failed to free itself. "Oh no," Evelyn whispered. The mother bobcat made a deep rattling sound behind them. Now that they knew where to look, they could see the desperation in every part of her. She had not been stalking the trampoline. She had been circling it, checking it, staying close to the exact place where her kitten was trapped. And when she could not free it herself, she had stayed in the yard where humans would have to see her. Ben leaned closer. The kitten's eyes were huge with fear. Its breathing came fast and shallow. One little paw scrabbled weakly at the grass each time the trapped foreleg pulled tight. Russell shined the flashlight harder and swore softly. "That brace gap's got it good." "We can lift the trampoline," Evelyn said immediately. Ben shook his head. "Not if it shifts the wrong way. Could twist the leg worse." The mother bobcat moved 3 steps closer. Russell rose halfway instinctively, but the animal stopped there, low and rigid, not threatening so much as unbearable in its concentration. Ben could feel the line between them, wild fear on one side, human improvisation on the other, and the trapped kitten in the middle. "We need to widen that brace space," he said. "Or tilt the frame," Russell said. Ben looked at the trampoline. The lower support brace was bolted beneath the central ring, forming a narrow steel angle. If they could lift one side of the trampoline just enough to take pressure off the brace without jolting the frame, the kitten might come free, or they might make it worse. The kitten thudded weakly again against the steel. That decided it. Ben moved to one side of the trampoline while Russell took the opposite. "On three," Ben said. "Slow, just enough to raise it." Evelyn positioned herself near the edge with the blanket ready. They lifted. The trampoline rose only a few inches on one side, but the whole mat shifted with a rubbery groan. Underneath, the kitten twisted and cried sharply. The mother bobcat sprang forward 2 paces, then stopped so suddenly dirt sprayed from her paws. Her mouth opened on a raw, torn sound that froze all three humans where they were. "Hold," Ben said through clenched teeth. Russell kept the frame steady, muscles straining. Ben dropped back down and reached under, gloved hands searching for the trapped foreleg. Now that the brace tension had changed slightly, he could slip 2 fingers between the steel and the kitten's shoulder. The little body shook violently at the touch. "Easy," he murmured, though his own voice didn't sound steady. He rotated the leg gently backward, feeling for the angle that would reverse the twist. The kitten gave one weak cry, and then suddenly, all at once, slid free into his palm. "I've got it!" Russell let the frame down carefully. Evelyn was already spreading the blanket on the grass. The kitten was shockingly light, all trembling bones, dusty fur, and oversized paws. One foreleg hung awkwardly against its chest, not obviously broken, but clearly strained. Ben carried it only 2 steps before kneeling and setting it on the blanket, then backed away immediately, pulling Evelyn with him. The mother bobcat rushed in. She went straight to the kitten, lowering her head so fast it looked like she might strike, but instead she began licking its face, chest, and shoulder with frantic, almost violent urgency. The kitten answered with thin, cracked cries and pushed against her chest. Evelyn pressed her fist to her mouth. Russell turned his face away for a second and looked toward the fence until he had himself back. The mother inspected the sore foreleg, licked it again, and then tried to lift the kitten by the scruff. It cried sharply and sagged. She stopped, adjusted, tried again. Same result. The leg wasn't ready. "We should call a rehabber too," Evelyn said, voice shaky. Ben was already doing it, dialing the county wildlife rescue number he found buried 3 layers down on a local resource page. A volunteer answered. She asked the right questions quickly. Was the mother still there? Was the kitten bleeding? Was it breathing normally? Could the mother move it? When Ben described the situation, she told them the best thing they could do was exactly what they were already doing. Keep distance, keep quiet, and let the mother decide whether she could relocate the kitten herself. Forced separation, she said, often did more harm unless the kitten was critically injured. So they waited. The sky dimmed from gold to blue-gray. Porch lights blinked on in neighboring yards. From upstairs, Owen and Lily watched from behind the front curtain, seeing only the shapes of adults in the yard and their father speaking in low, urgent bursts on the phone. The mother bobcat stayed crouched over the kitten on the blanket, grooming, nudging, and listening. Every now and then she looked up at the humans, then back at the kitten, as if reminding herself that the strange, dangerous part had not ended, but had changed. After several minutes, the kitten managed to sit upright. Its forelegs still trembled when it tried to bear weight, but it no longer dangled uselessly. The mother made a deep, low sound and tested the scruff again. This time she got a slightly better hold. She lifted, carried the kitten 2 short steps toward the oak tree, then set it down and licked the leg again. Russell let out a long breath. Smart thing, he murmured. She moved the kitten in stages, not in one smooth run back to the woods, but in careful little carries and pauses, across the grass, past the sandbox, toward the low gap beneath the back fence where the ground dropped away toward the creek path. Every time she stopped, she checked the kitten all over again. Every time it cried a little less. At the fence line, she paused and looked back. Evelyn would later refuse to call that look gratitude because the word felt too tidy and too human for what had happened. But she would always remember the stillness of it, The wild mother in the darkening yard, the freed kitten hanging gently from her mouth, the trampoline behind them, and the sense that something impossibly fragile had just been trusted to human hands for a few suspended minutes. Then the bobcat slipped through the fence gap and disappeared into the brush with her kitten. No one in the yard moved for a long time. The trampoline stood there in the middle of the grass exactly as it always had, but it no longer looked harmless. Ben went over after several minutes and crouched beneath it again with the flashlight. The central support brace where the kitten had been trapped formed exactly the kind of narrow pinch point a curious small animal could wedge into and never understand how to reverse out of. If the mother hadn't stayed in the yard, if she'd fled at the first sign of people, if Evelyn had shut the curtain and decided it was someone else's problem, the kitten would almost certainly have died there, under a family trampoline, while the neighborhood settled into an ordinary evening. Russell was the first to speak. "You need to wrap that center brace tomorrow." Ben nodded. "Tonight." He did it immediately. Foam insulation, duct tape, and a cut section of old pool noodle from the garage because once you knew a danger existed, leaving it until morning felt like a kind of cowardice. Evelyn called the wildlife volunteer back and left an update. Later that night, once the kids were finally convinced the bobcats were gone and safely back in the woods, she found Lily sitting on the stairs hugging her knees. "Did she know to come here?" Lily asked. Evelyn sat beside her for a long moment before answering. "I don't know exactly what she knew, but she knew her baby was trapped, and she knew she couldn't fix it by herself." That answer seemed to satisfy her daughter more than anything cleaner might have. The next afternoon, Ben checked the fence line for tracks and found them easily in the soft creekside soil. Adult bobcat prints, two smaller sets beside them, one with a slightly uneven front step. 3 days later, the wildlife volunteer texted to say a trail camera in the creek corridor had captured a female bobcat with two kittens moving normally through the underbrush. One of the kittens favored its foreleg a little, but it was traveling with the mother. Ben printed the image and taped it inside the mudroom cabinet, where the family kept dog leashes, sunscreen, and spare batteries. After that, the Harpers changed small things around the yard. The trampoline braces were padded permanently. The crawl space under the shed was checked. Fence gaps got screened where they could without blocking drainage, not because they believed wild animals and suburban life could ever be fully separated, but because now they understood how easily one could spill into the other through a single overlooked design flaw. And on certain evenings, when dusk settled over the yard and the trampoline stood quiet in the fading light, Evelyn sometimes found herself glancing toward the back fence, half expecting to see a lean, tawny shape waiting there again. Not to be helped this time, but simply to remind her how close the wild world always was. Close enough to step through a fence line, circle a child's trampoline, and wait until someone finally heard the trapped life thudding beneath it.